Everyone in South Asia, and good evening to people in Austin. This is the LabVIEW Advantage YouTube interviews with the LabVIEW personalities and LabVIEW champions all over the world who have contributed to the LabVIEW community to shape the future of LabVIEW and the experience for the LabVIEW users. My name is Gurung. I'm the certified LabVIEW architect and LabVIEW champion. I'll be the host for today. And I have got a very, very special guest for today. It's no other than, I'm not going to reveal immediately, but he has been the founding members of the LabVIEW Champion group. And without that, we wouldn't have been here. I would like to hear directly from him, because I do not know, I have that much of a, experience on how to introduce him. So with further ado, I want to introduce you the man himself, Chris Cilino.
Oh, thank you very much, Ram.
Yeah, thank you,
oh my gosh, I am beyond flattered. I am beyond honored to be interviewed by you. This is incredible.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that I was one of the founding members of the LabVIEW Champions group. Not quite. We'll get there. We'll get there. Okay. But let me tell you a little bit about my story, how I was introduced to LabVIEW, and what it means to me, both personally and professionally. I would imagine that my story is somewhat similar to what a lot of engineers have experienced. See, I graduated from the University of Texas at Austin in 2001 with a chemical engineering degree of all things. And and they didn't teach us how to program back in the day when in my chemical engineering program. Through an interesting series of events, I found myself working at a small company, like less than 10 people. And it was there that I was first exposed to computer programming, period. And the way that happened, I was working with Microsoft Excel, and I was doing some data entry by hand, which is absolutely insane.
Yeah, if you had loads and loads of data.
Oh yeah, it was crazy. Well, I discovered this thing called the macro recorder, and I could do something inside of Excel and see what the syntax was. And I thought, oh, this is kind of cool. So I could translate my actions into code. And while that was kind of neat, I found that there was, I don't know how to describe it. It's almost like the syntax and the words and how you declared variables were fighting with me. Plus, I couldn't figure out what are all the capabilities of this language. So I had to go online and do a whole bunch of searching, and I didn't know the words to search for. So that was my first experience with programming. But what I quickly learned was there's this really powerful tool called the computer. But right now, I'm the slave, and it's the master, and that's not cool. So fast forward a couple of months, and at this small company, I was in charge of testing some DUTs, and the way that we would do it is it was all manual. So we would literally stimulate a DUT, and I would look at a trace on an oscilloscope. Well, that's crazy. So the company that I was at had some connections at National Instruments, and we contracted with somebody from NI to come in and automate the whole entire thing. And what was really cool, the gentleman who came in was exceptionally generous with his knowledge. And of course, he brought LabVIEW on site, and he started coordinating via GPIB with a whole bunch of instruments. And I would tell him, what are the sequence of events to do the testing? And I would say, you do A, then B. And he would actually start writing code in front of me. And I saw the code that he was writing. And Ram, I don't know how to explain this, but it just made sense. It looked like what I saw in my mind.
Yeah, just like your visualization, visualization of events and everything.
Precisely. Well, so coming from an engineering background, we tend to think in terms of black boxes and passing inputs and outputs to all these black boxes. And so when I saw that in a coding language, I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. So the gentleman, again, he was exceptionally generous with his knowledge, and I told him I was really interested in this programming thing. And he's like, well, let me see if I can't help you get a copy of LabVIEW. So I got my hands on a copy of LabVIEW, and I still remember this weekend that I spent the whole time programming. I fell in love with it. The first thing that I thought was, what's just a small problem that I could solve, just for the fun of it? And is LabVIEW going to work with me or against me? And so the problem that I came up with, I'm going to create an alarm clock, right? So when the current time equals some set time, light up a Boolean on the front panel.
Yeah.
And the IDE, the LabVIEW IDE, it helped me write the code. I didn't have to go online to figure out where do I do Boolean logic. There was this really cool thing called the palette. And there was this logical representation or organization of all of these functions. And I could use the hover help and hover over all of the functions inside the palette. And so LabVIEW taught me how to program, and it enabled me to express in code what was in my mind.
Yeah.
It also encouraged me to dream. So here's what I mean. Within inside of an hour or 2 hours, I was able to write this alarm clock. And that was pretty cool. Yeah, except nobody wakes up to a Boolean flashing on a front panel.
Yeah,
right?
makes sense. Yeah.
I need some audio. So I discovered how to use ActiveX to control Windows Media Player. Now, I had no idea what this ActiveX thing was, but there was some stuff inside of LabVIEW that just made it easy. So I got LabVIEW to play a song when the alarm clock went off, and it's like, this is great. But wait just a minute. Hold on. I don't want to wake up to the same song every morning. I know. I want to point LabVIEW to a directory's worth of music and have it play through the directory of music. And I got that to work. It's like, wait, I'm still waking up to the same song every morning. It starts at the top and it works its way to the bottom. Is there a randomizer? And I found how to randomize stuff. So this is great. Now I'm waking up to a different song in a directory every morning. But wait, I want more. I want to be able to not point to just a single directory, but point to as many directories as I want. Randomize the list. And I got that to work. But I want more. Turns out I don't want to list a whole bunch of directories. I want to point to a single directory and have LabVIEW scour through my hard drive and present me with a list of all the music. And I got that to work. But I want more. I want to be able to create multiple playlists and play through them randomly or, in order. And I got that to work. So here's the short story. LabVIEW let me dream. And LabVIEW taught me how to do the programming. And with it allowed me to be self-sufficient, and that was amazing. So I was hooked. And so I was still working at this small company at the time, and I was like, I want to find out more about this NI thing, and I'd be interested to go and actually work for the group of people that makes such an incredible idea as this graphical programming. Cool. So that's when I started my career at NI in, I think it was March, April, May 2005 or something like that. And I started in the applications engineering department. And for all of those out in the world, I want to give a huge shout out to the applications engineers at NI. The quality of people answering the phone, they will bend over backwards to help you solve your problem. I mean, the AE department is incredible. And I felt very honored to be a part of this group of folks. Well, having gone into the AE department, I was quickly recognized as the LabVIEW guy. I loved answering all kinds of LabVIEW questions, and people would come to me with, how do I do these different applications? Now, back at that time, it was LabVIEW 7.1. That's when I first started. So I got to be an AE for LabVIEW 8.0 and the introduction of the project and all of the advances that came around with the project, multiple targets and controlling really complex systems. Really, really cool. So I spent 2.5 years in the AE department helping customers. And I was like, I want to do this LabVIEW development thing professionally as a full-time job. And so there was an opportunity that opened up for me inside of NI to own and extend the DAC assistant. And I always joke with everybody. Yeah. So I inherited the DAC assistant from a gentleman that I greatly respect. His name is Reed Lee. And I got to sit under his excellent tutelage for, I don't know, 5 years. And he taught me all kinds of stuff. Now, he put together the architecture and of the DAC assistant and made it so I could plug in and extend what was there. And I always joke with everybody. I'm like, all the really good stuff about the DAC assistant, that was me. All the bugs, somebody else. Of course, the program bugs. But what was really cool, Reed put together an entire system that was UI plug and play. We could actually substitute in different user interfaces depending on the piece of equipment the customer had selected. And that was really powerful. Then, once the user was done with their configuration, Reed had put together a system that would allow us to programmatically create a block diagram on the back end. So LabVIEW could write LabVIEW code. my mind was blown.
Wow.
And not only was it just the DAC assistant that I had ownership over, but it was all of the support software like a build system.
Yeah.
We had to build the DAC assistant for 4 different versions of LabVIEW across 2 different types of businesses across different operating systems. That's a hard problem to solve. By the way, we needed a test suite. By the way, we localized into 6 different languages. And it turns out LabVIEW let us do all of this. So we got to apply professional software development to this incredible language. And again, I was hooked. So I spent 5 years on the DAC assistant in R&D, and then I moved to the sound and vibration measurement suite, where I also got to do build process sort of stuff. Yeah, and one of the things I love, there's so many toolkits and add-ons to the LabVIEW IDE, it's nuts. So I spent about two and a half years doing the sound and vibration measurement suite, and got to work with another incredible guy, Doug Bendeley, absolutely out of this world. So that was my 7.5 years in R&D doing professional G development. And then I decided I want to do something different. I don't know what it is, but I want to do something different. And this is where I kind of started intersecting with the community. I came up with an idea. Well, I heard about this, I should say, we'll take a step back. There's a common problem that a lot of G developers try and solve. And that is, there's some piece of information, maybe it's a channel name or maybe some name, and you want to correlate that to a piece of data. So oftentimes, customers will put together 2 arrays, and they're kept in sync. They're parallel arrays. And we quickly find out that's error prone, because what happens if you insert an element into one array and you forget to insert into the parallel array? You're hosed. Well, then you quickly switch to a 2-dimensional array, and so now you can see 2 different columns. Well, LabVIEW doesn't allow mixed data types. So what happens if you wanted to have a name, but you wanted to have a number as well? Well, there's this thing called a variant lookup table. And so you can use the variant as a key value pair, almost like dictionaries. And I thought to myself, this is really powerful, but I don't think that customers would look for the variant to have this key value lookup table. I know. I'm going to create something that presents in an API this intuitive means of you associating a name with some value. And more than that, not only do I want to have this thing that has a bunch of named value pairs, I want this thing to be able to contain other dictionaries. So it's a hierarchical dictionary system. And each element, each node, each dictionary knows which dictionary it's a part of and all the dictionaries that it contains. This is called the LabVIEW container. And I got really, really excited about this. So that was the tail end of my time in R&D. And I started shopping that idea around inside of NI. Well, again, I was looking for a change. And one of the people that I presented this idea to was in marketing. And he was like, this kid has like 7 years of R&D experience. He gets really passionate about LabVIEW. He can talk with customers. This is great. I know. Let's send him to developer days, and let's see if he can present in front of customers. And so I went out to, I think it was Dallas and Houston, and I got to hang out with folks like Liz Stice. And it was really a lot of fun. And I presented stuff like the producer-consumer architecture and queued message handlers. And I got really fired up in front of customers, and customers and me were having a really great time. And so we're done with the developer days, and Liz, she's on the sales staff, walks up to me and says, "What are you doing in R&D? You need to be in marketing or sales, man." And I was like, "Oh, maybe, I don't know." But again, I was looking for a change, so there's this marketing possibility. And so I decided to go into marketing. Now we're getting close to the LabVIEW Champions, but before I did that, I've actually posted the LabVIEW container to the community, because one of my strongest values, if I solve a problem, I don't want anybody else to solve that problem. Let's start helping each other, not reinvent the wheel. Let's
not
make
wasting,
the one way.
not wasting the time,
That's right. I think that let's not waste our own time. If Ram, you've made something, I want to use what you've built. If nobody's built it before, I want to contribute to the community. I am convinced LabVIEW's greatest untapped resource is the community itself. And there's a couple of challenges I think that we face, but we'll get to that in just a second.
Yes, I don't know.
Anyways, so I leave R&D, I go into marketing, and I was put in charge of a couple of different things. One was the community. Another spot was over the customer's experience moving from LabVIEW to LabVIEW NXG. And that was a really challenging part of my marketing experience. So we'll say I think that NI has done a really good job with that. Still a work in progress. I think that I want to concentrate on the community aspect because I was handed over this program called the LabVIEW Champions, and it had been going for a couple of years. Folks like Chris Relf helped start it, and that guy's legendary, absolutely legendary. And Altenbach, I mean, everybody knows these people. So, I mean, he's got, I don't know, 50,000 posts on the discussion forums. It's like, is that this guy's full-time job? How in the world does he know so much? Wow. Anyways, so I was given this program, and internally at NI, I didn't feel like it was being given the appropriate amount of weight and care, both internally and externally. And I was like, this is a group of people that has a tremendous amount of skill to offer. So I championed the Champions program internally at NI. Whenever there was a question in R&D, like, what should NXG have inside of it? I was like, let's ask the champions. Yeah. And one of the concerns the champions had on a frequent basis was NI week. Yeah, it's cool that I get the chance to hang out with customers and I can help people out, but is there really content there for me as a champion that I can learn from? And in all honesty, there wasn't a whole bunch at that champions level. And so we dreamed up the idea together as a group. I said, what if we use the champions to solve their own problem and lift the entire community as well? And that's where this idea of the champions track, or the CPAD track, hashtag CPAD, that's where that came from. So I spent 2 years in marketing, and I loved the champions program. I championed its validity and value inside of NI, and I gave it a stage at NI week so that the champions would be incentivized to come and present to the community. Yeah. And so now, well, that's where I left the program. And the year that I left NI, this was 2015, I think, I went to Cirrus Logic, and that was the first year of the champions track. Now, Nancy Henson took over my work. And the first year of the champions track, well, okay, so here was the challenge. All right, champions, here's your challenge. We're going to give you one room at NI week for the entire NI week, and we want you to fill it with whatever material you see fit. Wow. Here's the trick. Here's the trick. If it doesn't have a good attendance, we're canceling this. If it has a good attendance, then we'll start continuing this on from year to year. The first year in, that room was packed every session. Every session. People loved it. In fact, so much that the second year, it wasn't just one room, it was 3 rooms. And now the third year, it's grown even more. So I think that the community has spoken. There's this tremendous amount of technical expertise that we have in the champions and other folks as well. And now NI Week, in addition to everything else that NI Week was before, brings intense, rich, application-specific information that all LabVIEW developers are going to face, or they will eventually. Here's a great example. One of the common questions that I think gets raised is, how do I interact with a piece of hardware in a generic way so that when that piece of hardware dies, I can just call into another piece of hardware from another vendor? That's a hardware abstraction layer. And this idea of abstraction layers, it's a difficult problem to solve. But I think that there's a lot of good guiding material that the champions have put together. So I'm very honored to be a part of this group. Okay, now here's what's really kind of weird. So I invested a whole bunch in this group at NI. I left. I applied for the program, and then I was accepted. So all of the work that I did, I got the chance to benefit from. And it's awesome. So again, my hat's off to Nancy Henson, who's done a great job running the program. And I'm so excited to see it continue to grow. And this year is no exception. So I'm one of the co-chair for the champions track this year. Awesome. And dude, the lineup of material, to the world, if you have never been to NI Week, come for it's called the Software Engineering Process Architecture Design, CPAD is what it stands for. That track is full of really, really great information. So come to NI Week. Hashtag NI Week 2019.
Yeah, that's
so,
really awesome.
Yeah, so now, okay, that's right around my transition from National Instruments into Cirrus Logic. As much as I enjoyed my marketing role, I missed my R&D roots. And so an opportunity arose for me at this company called Cirrus Logic, which is in downtown Austin. And Cirrus is one of the world leaders for doing audio audio stuff. We make ICs for audio processing. As an example, we're in some headphones for active noise cancellation. And so we make these chips that have our IP embedded on it, and that's really cool. Well, like any semiconductor manufacturer or designer, you have to be able to validate the designs that you come up with before you produce it in your tens or hundreds of millions of parts. Well, before I got there, there was a system in place to do that validation, but it wasn't as efficient as it could have been if we put together a framework that remained constant over time, and we only tweaked small areas as we got new projects. So I architected that entire framework with the excellent help of folks like Elizabeth Kenyon and Bill Eisenhower. Big shout out to them. And one of the coolest people I've gotten the chance to work with is Dan Kimmett. So I would say this to anybody. The manager that you work with makes all the difference in the world. Do everything that you can to instill confidence in your boss that you can do the job, because as engineers, I feel like we have a lot of talent, and LabVIEW unlocks that talent. So you want to work with a manager where you can gain the trust of that manager, and then the manager just turns you loose to do things. And I worked with Dan, and Dan is an incredible guy who I was able to build up that trust with. And he would just say, Chris, we have this problem. Do you think that you can handle it? I'm like, yeah, I think I got this. He's like, all right, let's do this. And so he gave me the chance to use LabVIEW and the NI tool chain to just innovate like crazy. And I put together a whole entire set of abstraction layers and a GUI to interact with those abstraction layers. In fact, I got to present it on the NI Week keynote stage last year. So the funny story about that, when I was in R&D, believe it or not, I was terrified of that keynote stage. I'd go to NI Week every year, and I would say to myself, you will never see me on that keynote stage.
Yeah, the world is watching you over there.
I know. Oh my gosh, what if I say something that I'm not supposed to say, or what if I forget my lines? It's terrifying being on that stage, and it's the best thing ever. So last year, I got the chance to get on that stage and present the really, really cool work that Cirrus and Dan Kimmett and some of my other coworkers have allowed me to do. And it has been by far the highlight of my career. So while I've been at Cirrus, I've been able to lead some folks who have really fantastic application-specific knowledge. They know semiconductor. They know validation. And some of them knew enough about LabVIEW to be, we'll say, dangerous. I came in and I was able to introduce best practices and bring some architecting to bear, and then ask these people some specific questions that allowed me to tweak the architecture and work with them to actually develop this architecture. And all along the way, I got to teach them object-oriented programming, separation of concerns, solid principles. I got to document lots of stuff. Working at Cirrus has been incredible because of how I've been able to share my passion for LabVIEW, how I've been able to teach people software engineering practices that I learned all the way back at NI, and that I've seen work in lots of contexts at Cirrus Logic. So I always joke with everybody, once I start a conversation, it's like a roller coaster ride, and it's like you hang on, elsewise just go for the ride. So I want to pause and say, any questions from you or anything for clarification? Because I can keep on going.
Yeah, Chris, that has been an awesome adventure. You have discussed that you started, and an awesome thing. The first interview I took was with Chris Roebuck from UK. He said he was a physicist, and he never knew that you can do all this kind of awesome thing integrating, communicating with the instrument, acquiring the data, and controlling something, and then. For example, he went to the NI CLA summit in CERN in Geneva, and then he was mind blown because it was the largest physics accelerator, a large hadron collider, and then he went over there and then he saw it, and then the largest physics lab is being powered by LabVIEW.
That's right.
And, it was a really interesting thing, and then now you can And from your side, like you came as a like a chemical engineering background in the beginning. You started using LabVIEW, and then now like you love music, and then like you wanted to tweak, play all these things, and then finally, after having all this experience working as an application engineer, I also had like last 2 years, like before I started my own firm, like I was consultant for the National Instruments India, and I was like actually working closely with like a application engineering team, and then I know like how much like inspired, dedicated, and then like the different kind of challenges they are thrown in are like diverse. And within that period, like entire like what are the things like these people are trying to build, what are the challenges these guys are facing. Sometimes like you will be very happy like helping people out, and sometimes like you just want to cry because like people do not know how to code. That are the things. And then like and you also like you had immense opportunity to work from like a sales team, the application engineering support, to the R&D team. And wow, like you just went inside like how things functions and came out, and then you started extending the functionalities like DAC-MX you spoke about. I know like your contribution has helped a lot of like engineers and scientists and physicists and everyone. Like I come across like lots of like scientists and engineers who do not know anything about like programming, and now like NXG has even simplified that, and then like you can even like broadcast your data to the internet without like having any like network engineering or internet science technologies and everything. And then like oh, like it's like a mind blowing. I'm just like summarizing.
No, and I think that you hit on a really important point. I think the world of Jeff Kodosky, his vision for LabVIEW is amazing, and his passion is to give scientists and engineers a quick way, an easy way, an immediate way to make the computer their slave. And these are my words, but the idea is, I as the engineer and the scientist have a lot of science and engineering background, and that's what I want to concentrate on. The computer sciencey stuff, I don't really care about that. It's the task at hand. It's automating measurements inside of CERN. It's automating validation. That's the job, not pointers, not arrays. And so Jeff's whole entire notion, his whole entire vision behind LabVIEW is, can we create a language that hides away unnecessary information for scientists and engineers so that they can concentrate on their applications and minimize the amount of time they have to worry about this minutia, these details. And I think that that is one of the biggest powers of LabVIEW altogether. It hides away unnecessary details. So one of the things that I'm excited about, while, like you said, NXG is making that even simpler, more abstraction, that comes into play with things like the system diagram, where you can see your entire system graphically. Not only that, you can do coordination between the different elements of your system. How you see how data is getting passed between different nodes in your system. That's incredible. Channel wires, the same sort of thing. Jeff's innovation and his passion, it seems endless. And that to me is an inspiration. Again, and I think that one of the most untapped elements of LabVIEW, certainly LabVIEW has fantastic room to grow, and it's grown a whole bunch, but there's this other thing, the LabVIEW community. So while my first contribution was the LabVIEW container, I've also been able to do, thank you to Cirrus, they've let me publish things that are completely Cirrus agnostic. So I've been able to publish libraries using JKI's technology, VI Package Manager, as well as, which is, I loved Jim Kring's vision to make for the community where we could start contributing in this one spot, different libraries. Then you've got NI Package Manager on the horizon, which is helpful. And then you have Derek, I'm going to mispronounce his last name, Trepanier, I think is how you say it. Package Manager. So I think that the community is on the cusp of overcoming some technical barriers so that we can use incredible language to develop libraries, start contributing to the community in an intuitive place, and then all of us can find that information. We can areas that we need. It's still a work in progress. I know there's a lot of work. One of the things that I'm excited about, dreaming, and I don't know what this looks like, but dreaming of a way where we can contribute all of our code to the application and we all just know to go to this one spot to get the code. As you write code in a way to be contributed to the library, that actually enforces good software engineering. You start to exercise things like separation of concerns. Here's an example. So I put together an API that automates interactions with Atlassian. Now, that's a generic idea. But there's some things that you have to do to make it work correctly for your specific server. So I created an object API, and then I made a Cirrus implementation. Well, I can parent to the world, and now I know that there's only generic information inside of the parent, which is something that you should be doing for the program. And then for the specific, put it in the child. So the community certainly helps everybody out of the community, but I think it also helps individuals become better programmers, because we have to other people. We have to think through what's specific, what's generic. So I'm really excited to see where the community is going to be going.
Yeah, this is like a really interesting, because like you have mentioned like some names like Jim Kring, like before, like there were like lots of tools in the LabVIEW tools network, but like people do not knew how to access it. They have to go to the internet, find it somewhere, download it, do all these things. And he organized everything inside the VI package manager. And I think NI PM is like has been inspired from that one. And like JK has been like during the keynotes at the NI week or something, they have always been saying, pushing the barrier of like what LabVIEW can do and everything. And that's like a keyword. So Chris, like I know that like you are the proponent of object-oriented programming and solid principles and everything. So like what do you want to tell people? Because like most of the people, when they think like there's a little bit of this doubt among people that they don't actually see LabVIEW as the core programming language. And then some people think that okay, like we can do it easy, but after a while, like when your application gets sophisticated and you have to control, integrate the real-time system, third-party hardware, or the FPGA, people seem to like a little bit juggle around, and then all this kind of thing. So like what they can do to like perceive a LabVIEW as like a sort of like a core programming language, at the same time how they can integrate the object-oriented programming and the solid principles. Because I'm like mostly working with the customers from like India, and here like it's still like it's a huge market, but like it's still in like growing slowly. So like what do you want to say, like the advantages and everything, like integrating the best practices in their practices?
Now that's fantastic. So the very first thing that I would say is the development of an application is a lot of art and some science, and so some of the art is how much architecting should you do for any given application. And the unfortunate answer, there's no easy answer to that, but some questions that I like asking to help people walk through this is how many other people are going to be using this code? Is the code itself in its final state, or do you want to be changing it over time? How long is this code going to live? Is it prototype? Is it going to live a week? Is it going to live a month? Is it going to live a year? The reason why all of those questions are important is because the more people that are going to be using it, the more flexible we want it to be, and the longer lifespan it's going to have, that warrants additional architecting. If you're putting together a prototype to just demonstrate, oh, I want to get that GPIB instrument to do a thing, don't architect this. You just throw some VIs together, and that's the power of LabVIEW.
Yeah.
You can get what you want immediately. You don't have to. You get the GUI layer and you get the programming layer slammed together. That's beautiful. Simultaneously, that's also one of its. Depending on who's looking at it, people could say it's too elementary. You can't do more than just that. And it turns out that's actually incorrect. Object-oriented programming. Thank you, Stephen Loftus-Mercer. That was introduced in LabVIEW 8.2. And that's brought a whole new set of capabilities to the language itself, not the least of which is extensibility, flexibility. It makes modularity a whole lot simpler. And these are all nice catchwords, but what does it mean? It means that me, as an idea developer, I can put together an idea of it that's functional and then give it to you, and my idea might not do exactly what you want. Well, do you copy all of my software and just tweak it a little bit? Well, no, that's crazy, because now I've got two different copies. Object-oriented programming allows you to take that one small sliver of the code and add just a little bit to it. So it's a minor modification. So LabVIEW lets you do that. It takes a little bit of forethought. Now, one of the constant questions that I get, and rightly so, is how much forethought should I put into this code? Like, we need to ship parts. Time is money. Time is money. So we need to write code and ship. And I'm like, I understand. So I think that LabVIEW lets you do an iterative approach. So maybe in the first version of your code, you satisfy your customer's most important needs. And LabVIEW lets you do that. You can prototype an idea super quick. It's not necessarily the final product, but you can at least give some value to your end customer. And you can say, all right, what do you think about that? And in 3 weeks, I'm going to give you the next version. Well, in that next version, maybe you re-architect, and maybe you start using object-oriented programming, which again is a first-class citizen inside of LabVIEW. And in that second iteration, you take the lessons that you learn from that initial prototype, and you bake those lessons learned into this new version of your application. Now, what's really cool is you can start to write your applications so that version 2, you ship that to your customer, and your customer's like, but can we also blah, 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 blah. If you architect your code right, you don't have to rewrite the whole entire thing. Object-oriented programming is one means for you to add additional behavior, or perhaps change the original idea without rewriting everything. Now, beyond just object-oriented programming, there are design patterns like the actor framework, which is really, that's like the granddaddy of all design patterns, right? But there are certainly some we'll say simpler, kind of more straightforward ones like state machines. Everybody knows a state machine, or event-driven state machines, or producer consumers. And one of the things I love about LabVIEW, all of the different design patterns I just said ship with LabVIEW. You can go to File, New Project, and there are all of these templates that you can start from with the advantages and disadvantages of each. And so what I would say to anybody who considers LabVIEW paint by number, which I've been told that on a number of occasions, or it's just just too colored. It's like, yes, you can do something very, very quickly. That's one of its strengths. You can also architect things that are exceptionally complex. And you mentioned a couple of very complicated applications, and that just blows the mind. SpaceX is another one. I mean, again, Cirrus has done some pretty complex stuff under the hood. The applications are just growing. The National Ignition Facility, I think, has used LabVIEW for some stuff over there, which is really pretty sweet. So there's some really cool applications that you can build on LabVIEW. This is not a question. This is objective. The language can model complex systems. No question. So one of the other objections that I currently hear is, but I just don't like graphical programming. And I understand. I totally get it. LabVIEW, while a general purpose programming language, has its strengths and has its weaknesses, which is true of every language. Python has its strengths and its weaknesses. C has its strengths and its weaknesses. As an architect, as a professional, you have to know the right tool to choose for the job. You're not going to write a web page in LabVIEW. You shouldn't do that. There are other technologies out there. That's fine. But if you're going to be controlling a whole entire benchtop of equipment from a single GUI, there is nothing better than LabVIEW itself. So choose the right tool for the job. And that means being able to think through what are the advantages and disadvantages of all of these different languages, because every language has a plus and a minus. So, okay, for those folks that don't like graphical programming, I totally get it. Give it a try. Just try it. Try it.
Yes, Chris. Continue, Chris.
I was going to say, and one of the, well, okay, if I just try it, where do I get guidance? The NI community from NI.com is nuts. It's crazy how many people are on there. I mean, people post questions all the time, like, can LabVIEW do file I/O? Well, yeah. Okay, but sure, LabVIEW can't do TCP/IP. Yeah, it can. Okay, fine, but it's not like I can interact with other languages inside of LabVIEW. No, LabVIEW can call DLLs. LabVIEW can do you can call .NET assemblies. You can even interact with the command prompt. But okay, fine, this LabVIEW thing is kind of cool. What if I want to interact with LabVIEW from another language? That's fine. LabVIEW can export its functionality as DLLs. And again, it does TCP, and you can interact with it via the command line. So if anything, I would say give LabVIEW a try. It plays very well with lots of other programming languages. It's open. It's not this closed thing. And I can say from experience, having been on the inside of NI, they care about the customer. They care about what you're trying to do. They want to put the right features in your hand to make your life easy. So why choose LabVIEW? Because you have a whole entire organization dedicated to making your life easy. So that's my pitch. And I don't even work at NI anymore, I promise. I'm not getting paid for this. I just really believe in the language.
Yes, Chris, like we completely understand that like your journey has been like a very passionate one and everything. And what you have told is like absolutely true. Like some people, like you have said, they think that, you know, can LabVIEW do this? Can LabVIEW do that? And all this kind of thing. They are not actually exploring. Maybe like they are used to a certain kind of programming language, and then they have invested some time on that one. It's a little bit difficult to break their habit. One thing is that one. And another aspect is, you know, how long does it take to use the text-based programming language to do the same thing that LabVIEW already has some functionality, or the APIs that you have told, like the community has provided everything. For example, like OpenG and all this kind of toolkits. You don't actually have to do everything from scratch. That is the beauty of using LabVIEW. So that is what like I was also interested. And Chris, like we discussed that, you know, the dissimilarities and then the conflict between the text-based programmers and the LabVIEW users. But like in the community, I found like, you know, I come across like many people who claim they have got like a, you know, 10 years experience, 12 years experience, or even further. And like some are like, you know, just starting out a programming language, and then they think that, okay, like how good is LabVIEW and all these kind of things. You have already summarized, you know, you have to select the best programming language based on your requirements and everything. But at the same time, like what do you want to tell like, you know, people who have been programming, let's say like using LabVIEW for 10 years, and then they have not used any, you know, proper NI recommended guidelines or something, and then you run into creating the spaghetti code or the large, very large, you know, map of the world. So that like there were like lots of requirements that like why LabVIEW does not allow us to zoom in and zoom out and all this kind of things. So we get all these questions from the application engineering team when I was like working at NI, and like many people like they don't even know that like LabVIEW supports object-oriented programming as well. So what do you think, like you know, how we can you know, like pitch to this audience like who claim to have like a larger experience, and then like you know, who are starting out? Because what we think is like if the, you know, the beginners or like someone who has got 1-2 years of LabVIEW programming experience, and if they do not actually accept and then like implement the NI recommended guidelines, you are actually creating the bunch of people like you know, just like Chris summarized. I'm not like contradicting or anything, but like what Chris said, the people who claim to have like 10 years of experience, Chris actually had encountered a guy, and then he told that you don't have 10 years of experience, you just had 1 year of experience 10 times. So why, like, I'm not criticizing like you know, experience of people like what they have done, but like eventually the code they have written, eventually like they have to leave the organization, or like that code has to be given to somebody else to like maintain or like extend the functionalities and so on. So like it is going to slow down the process, and we will not be able to you know, like expose the entire you know, full-fledged power of LabVIEW. So how do you address that one?
Absolutely.
Chris, from your perspective?
So there's a really cool diagram that NI has. I believe it's called the happiness curve. So for anybody who starts off with LabVIEW, they're like, oh man, I don't have to program a GUI. I get all of this stuff for free. And I can, on the same block diagram, I can see all of my code. This is really pretty neat. And there's this one area of my code over here, and I like that there, but I want to also do it over here, so I'll copy and paste. Oh, and I also want to do it over here, so I'll copy and paste, and I'll copy and paste. And they got it to work, and that's cool. But after a while, maybe they set the code down. for a week, and they come back to it, and they say, oh, that one piece of code that I copied, I actually found a bug in it. So now I have to go fix it. Oh, man, where else did I do this? Oh, my gosh, this bug is all over the place. This LabVIEW language. Oh, so now you get to the happiness curve starts off with intrigue, and then you reach like this really kind of happy spot because you got this excitement because you got your stuff to work, and you got it to work quickly. And one of the reasons why you got it to work quickly is because you maybe copied and pasted stuff around, but that wasn't necessarily the best way of doing things. So then you start to hit all of the friction as a result of these shortcuts. So your enjoyment goes down. And then you're kind of at that break-even spot where you're like, I don't know if this is a good idea. Maybe somebody else can help me with my code. And then you show them your code, and somebody's like, dude, what were you thinking? Now your happiness curve is real low. So then somebody comes along and says, I see what you're trying to do. LabVIEW is great for prototyping stuff up front, but it's powerful enough to where you can also implement some strategies, some design patterns that could make your life a little bit easier. It takes some upfront investment, and if you think your code is going to live for a little while, let's maybe explore some of that upfront investment. And so then you're at the bottom part of your happiness curve, and then you discover things like the producer-consumer, or you discover sub-VIs, and you're like, oh, that solves a lot of problems. And then there's object-oriented programming, and you're like, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing ever. And then you discover things like the actor framework. Here's the whole entire point. LabVIEW lets you do what you want really, really quickly. LabVIEW also gives you lots of rope to hang yourself. Okay, it's going to give you a really long rope to hang yourself. And that's because NI wants to give you the freedom and the capability to get a result quickly. And that's really important. But they also want to give you the capability to express some forethought and do some design work. So how do you know when you should do some design work? If your code is going to live, I would recommend, if you're going to have to work for that code, walk away from it for maybe more than a week, and then have to come back to it, you need to do some architecting because your memory is not that good. Trust me, right? So you want to be able to write your code so that you do yourself a favor in the future, and you can read what you were doing. If you're going to be giving your code to somebody else, you probably need to put yourself in their shoes and help them think through, how do I read this code logically? Sub-VIs is a really great way to organize your code, as well as things like simple state machines or queue-based state machines, or the Delacorte. So we can start getting into like the Delacorte queue message handler. Anyways, if you think that this piece of software is going to be used by lots of people, and those people out there need to maybe use it in ways that you hadn't anticipated, now we really need to start talking about some object-oriented programming. LabVIEW can totally let you do that, and I think it lets you do it in a very elegant way. So it really kind of all boils down to requirements and ROI. If your requirement is, I need to get something up and running as quickly as possible, LabVIEW is your language. If you need to be able to write something that gets up and running relatively quickly, and you might need to come back to it in a week or two, LabVIEW is your language. It's going to take a little bit of work, maybe 10% upfront. You can do it. If you need to share your code with people, and this piece of code is going to last for years, LabVIEW is your language. It's just going to take some more upfront investment, and that's true of any programming language. So what I would say to the folks who've been out there for 10 years, like, I don't need sub-VIs, maybe the applications that you're writing don't require sub-VIs. Maybe it's the one-off thing. But if you want to start contributing to the community and maybe helping other people around you, I'd encourage folks to start considering API design and OO design, and maybe even some simple maybe state machines. Or here's an example. So I put together a really simple pattern called the sequencer. That's what I call it. All it is, I can talk through it a little bit. It's a hard-coded array of strings and a for loop with a case structure. So this case structure just goes through the array of strings. That's it. But when you open up this diagram, you see immediately, what is this VI going to do? And there aren't any sub-VIs. You just have different cases, and you swap through the cases. That's a really simple, a little simple architecture. And it's free for anybody. You can go find it. So having that little bit of upfront investment will save you pain in the future, if there is a future for that code. If there's not, don't bother. If there's a possibility, right? There's a possibility. I think it's worth it. So that's what I would say to people.
Yeah, that is really awesome. Like a Chris, like a very great input and everything. I think like many people like who are watching this interview, they'll be inspired, and then you know, they know the value, like all these things like LabVIEW can do and everything. Chris, like you have been engaged, you have like a different kind of roles in your like entire career. You worked as an AA, you were like inside the you know, R&D, and then like you know, in the marketing field as well. I think like in marketing, like that was one of the point, like you were able to know like what the customer actually wants, because I think like when you were like you were having like a very unique kind of problems from each customers. But when you are in front of the customers in like for example, NI days or NI week, the largest of them all, and then developer days, you mentioned you had the opportunity to present. So that is the where like you meet a large array of like customers, and then they are you know, asking you. So like and like recently we now have the LabVIEW NXT 3.0. So what do you think, like what will be the future of LabVIEW? Because like you have already, you know, you have seen it all. So I think like you will be the best person. I know like there are like more other like
oh man,
everybody like Jeff Kotarski is the like you know, visionary and everything, like the father of LabVIEW. But what do you think, like are we still like lacking some of the functionalities you have dreamt about? You are the dreamer, we know that. But what do you think, like what are the features like you are still looking forward?
There's two things. Okay, so we'll start off with object-oriented programming first. While LabVIEW has a very rich object-oriented programming syntax and semantics, one of the things that I think that it doesn't have quite yet is this idea of mixins or traits. In order for you to use the capability of another class, you have to inherit from it, and for some very good reasons, LabVIEW supports what's called single inheritance. So you can only use inheritance or something else called composition to get the functionality of another class. Well, there's another idea called traits, where I want the capabilities of another class, but I kind of just want to steal those abilities and bolt on abilities without having to inherit from. And so there's some conversations about what might traits or mixins look like in the future. And I've run into that that circumstance, that limitation on a number of occasions. I could give an example, don't worry about it. So that's one thing that I'm really, I would love to see change, and I believe that it will. I know that folks like Dimitri, I'm going to butcher his last name, Sagittarian.
Oh yeah, I've seen like a lot of presentations from him. Yeah.
Dimitri, I consider him like the grandfather of the community. Like when Dimitri speaks, you just silence and listen, because the man knows what he's talking about. Anyways, he has some ideas on perhaps how this bolting or this traits for classes might get implemented in the future. So that's really cool. That's one area. Something else that I was really excited about, even before I left NI, was this system diagram. And you might have seen the system diagram in LabVIEW NXG. It's really cool. You can graphically assemble like maybe your computer and a PXI chassis and a C-Ray, all that. I was like, that's really cool. I want to start doing that as a part of the buying experience on the web. So I go to ni.com and I want to start assembling my system on the web. I put down, so here's my canvas in a web page, and I put down my PC and I put down my C-Rio, and I say I want this version of LabVIEW and this version of DAC with this C-Rio. Is all that going to work together? So I want a system verification. That would be pretty sweet. Now I like this. Buy it. So hit the buy button and the boxes arrive. Great. I install LabVIEW, and I want to take that work as a part of the buying experience and start my programming from it. So import that online buying experience as my graphical, as my system diagram, and I can start programming right there. Better yet, what if I've already purchased LabVIEW and I put together a new system diagram and I'm like, I want a PC, and I've heard of that PXI chassis with that card. I design it and I hit the buy it button from within inside of the system diagram. Better yet, what if I could share my system diagram with you so that you know, here are all the pieces of equipment that I use together? Because one of the common questions is, can I use these different pieces of equipment together in this configuration of all the different versions of all the software? Well, if we've got customers starting to share with each other, here's the system that I have, that's fantastic. So is LabVIEW as an IDE and as a language done? No. I think that there's room for it. I think it's amazing, and I think that there's still really, really cool things on the horizon. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to see the maturity of NXG in the next few years. I think it's going to be amazing. And yes, it zooms, by the way. So we'll have the zoom in and out on the block diagram, which is really awesome.
Yeah, that's really.
I think that
continue.
I think the buying experience will be improved as well. I love the idea of the system diagram being as a shopping utility. That's helpful for me. I think that object-oriented programming and dynamic composition of user interfaces will be very, very important. So when I say dynamic composition of user interfaces, a hardware abstraction layer is one of the most common use cases. Let's imagine that you want to work with an instrument of type DMM, of type pick your favorite vendor here. Well, there are some bits of information that are common across all instruments, like maybe its name and its address. So I want to have a UI that has a sub-UI inside of it that changes depending on if I'm a DMM or a scope or any other category of instrument. And then another sub-diagram that's for the specific vendor. Okay, so that's 3 layers of dynamic composition. Well, what happens if one of my other instruments has 5 layers of dynamic composition? I want all of that. I have no idea how it's going to happen, but I really want all of that. And I want it all in a single UI versus tabs. Anyways, UI and UX, the user's experience is something that's very important to me. And I think that LabVIEW's user interfaces are getting a great overhaul in NXG. I think it's going to be very, very powerful. So you have updated UIs, you have new UI expressions, and then you have updated block diagrams. You have the same fantastic G language in NXG plus extra. So I'm excited. I'm excited for the future. I think it's going to be great.
Yeah, that's really, really like interesting points, Chris. Like you know, what are the things? And I also like had similar kind of thought. Like you said, you know, how to put the system, how my system looks like, and everything. Most of the time, people had to go through the internet and then like see like all this, you know, specs of the like a system hardware and everything. And I am still not sure whether it is going to work or not. And I think like this is going to like save a lot of time of all the like salespeople as well, from the NI as well as the NI Alliance partners as well, because your task is to like help simplify the you know, effort, the users, and then our engineers, scientists, and then the consumers who are going to make their product as you know, usable, use ready, like you know, market ready as quickly as possible. So that is the thing. So Chris, like what do you think? Like anything, your input, like how you know, recently in India, we started the like Indian lab user group, INLUC. So we have now like 147 members, and then we did like 2 meetings so far. I know like it's still a small number in comparison with the size of India, but yeah. So,
but still, a user group that has 140, that's very impressive. That's very impressive. Congratulations to all of you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much, Chris. And at the same time, like we are doing the quarterly meeting at the NI sales office, and because of the size of the geography of India, I know like US is also like a pretty huge, and you got like a different time zones as well. In India, we currently what we're doing is like we're conducting the quarterly meeting. And at the same time, like people who cannot travel to Bangalore, they actually tune up through the you know, Skype, and they can ask a question. They can present from there as well. And like a few months ago, like Chris Roebuck himself did the key presentation to our user group and everything. It was a really good experience and everything. So from your perspective, like you are an experienced person, and then like you also helped developing the LabVIEW Champions group, and it's like you know, like LabVIEW Champions are like spread all over the world with like different languages, different communities, and everything. So like what do you think, like what can be done better, or like your input and thoughts on like you know, what can be done better to like you know, everybody adopt and then get into this lab user group, so that we can make it more like a richer and richer.
So one of the things that I find to be absolutely critical for any group, but I think specifically for LabVIEW user groups, is vision. Answer the question, why are we here? What do we, as a group, what are we hoping to achieve? And I think that that vision is unique for every locale, every group of users. But what's important is that everybody in the group can get behind an idea. So as an example, I put together a user group at Cirrus, and I called it Bach. I like classical music, so I called this one Bach, B-A-C-H, after the composer. And I said, Bach's whole entire purpose is to teach the fundamentals of LabVIEW so that you can be efficient at your job in validation at Cirrus Logic. Wow. That's the vision, efficiency. Now, why did I choose Bach? Bach is classically regarded as the fundamental guy. Like, he came up with some ideas that everybody else built their ideas on. So Bach, as the fundamentals, teaches the fundamentals of the language. And it encourages other people to come with, so did you know that you can change the stop condition on a while loop? Like, that's a fundamental concept. You can go from stop if true to stop if false, or continue if true. It's fundamental things like that. Cool. What's the next stage? So I put together a second user group called Mozart, because Mozart used a lot of Bach's music, and Mozart is more advanced. Like, we're going to learn things like producer-consumer and event handling and dynamic event registration.
Wow.
So there were clear visions. It's, here's what we're hoping to achieve and what you're going to get out of it. We're going to teach the say the moderate fundamentals of LabVIEW so that you can do your job, whatever that is, more efficiently and more effectively. So if you can put together a vision statement that says clearly what we're going to do and why you should care, how you're going to benefit, gold. That's big, and that's part of my marketing background a little bit. They taught me that in marketing. Thank you, Elon Carey. So how do you, what would I recommend? Have a vision statement. Have how your vision is executed, especially with such a large group. Like, how do you make the individual who attends successful? Maybe you say something like, for our user group in India, we want to be an open community so that individuals can contribute their ideas and, I'm making this up now, and lift all of the attendees' general knowledge. This is accomplished by individuals giving presentations for each meeting and contributing PowerPoint slideshows with example code. Okay, great. So now I'm considering attending your user group. I see very clearly, oh, I want to learn, and I want to learn from a whole bunch of people. And are you kidding me? I get a PowerPoint slideshow and code for free?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, I want that. So it's this, what are we about, and what do you get out of it? That's what I'd recommend.
Yeah, Chris, like we have been doing the same thing for like the last 2 meetings. The next meeting is like scheduled to be happen in June. But we have found that like there are more experienced people in the industry, like even before maybe they have been using and then working in like a very large projects and everything. But some people actually like shy away, like they don't ask any questions. I think like it will take so like I think like it will take a time or something for them to like melt away a little bit or be more comfortable. That is the like question I had. Like so, what do you think? Like what can we do? Like in your perspective?
So what I found, you're right. There, when we work with engineers, there's this idea that if we as engineers ask a question, we're demonstrating incompetence by virtue of asking a question, and I think that's a lie. I think that's a lie. So how do you help people feel safe enough to ask questions? I think that that's one of the biggest jobs of the leader of the group themselves. So the leader needs to demonstrate humility and maybe ask questions that maybe everybody is thinking, but people are too afraid to say. So you might say, hey, we're going to talk about the actor framework. I wonder, how many of you in the audience don't necessarily feel comfortable with object-oriented programming? It's totally fine, right? So just actually, as a show of hands, how many of you do feel comfortable? I mean, because this has taken me a while to get used to. So I'm demonstrating some humility. I'm like, if you're like me, it took me a little while too. This is an okay place for you. This is a safe place for you. So I encourage people in the audience to start to be a little bit more vulnerable, to start asking questions by me as a leader demonstrating some humility and helping them to feel safe. I think that's really important.
Does
that make sense?
Yeah, Chris, thank you very much for your feedback and everything. So we're slowly running towards the finish line of this finish line. Sorry about my words. So towards the interview. So you have already told that you had some of the highlights of your career. So can you a little bit share your some of the highlights and extraordinary experience you had in your LabVIEW adventure?
Oh wow. Okay. So there's two things that I want to say, maybe three. The first thing is I want to pitch this idea. You're talking about how do folks out there gain expertise, especially if you're at a company. How do you know if you're doing it right at a company? How do you know if you're using software industry best practices? NI has this program called the Center of Excellence, and I think the world of this program. So one of the highlights of my career was achieving all of this qualifications to become a Center of Excellence at Cirrus Logic. That was incredible. And if anybody is interested about the Center of Excellence, go to ni.com, search Center of Excellence. You'll find everything that you need to know. It's great.
Wow.
But probably the highlight of my career, even above becoming a champion, which is, oh, wow. I got the chance to work with Jeff Kay for about a year. Getting to work with him, listening to his ideas, being in there when he was talking with marketing and marketing with him about how do we take his ideas and broadcast them to the world. For real, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Jeff is an incredible guy. So I think the world of him, and I would say that working with him has been the highlight. Second is being a LabVIEW champion. I absolutely love it. Third, I have gotten to do, I would say, the best work of my life at Cirrus as an architect, as a teacher. I've even gotten to do some marketing as a strategist. All of it. It's been all in one. And all of this, maybe this is fundamentally the biggest thing. When I graduated from college, I had the nagging, repeated message in the back of my mind: who would ever hire me? Who would ever hire me? I mean, what have I actually ever done? What can I really? Yeah, I got a chemical engineering degree, but what would ever make me stand out? So there wasn't a sense of confidence. When I taught myself how to program using LabVIEW, that gave me a sense of confidence nothing has ever even come close to before. And from that sense of confidence, I was able to do things like start working at NI, take on the DAC assistant, and ultimately lead up to things like working at Cirrus Logic, solving a really complex problem, and even conquering my biggest fear of getting on the NI Week keynote stage.
Wow.
So I would say that LabVIEW, beyond being an incredible programming language, personally for me, has given me a sense of confidence that I don't know how I would have gotten that elsewise. It allowed me to make the computer a tool for me to master, which that's been incredible.
Wow, Chris, that was awesome, an incredible journey you had. And then in the beginning, you said that rather than me being the computer making me a slave, or I'm dependent on who has actually written a code in that system and everything, I can actually modify the way it works based on my requirements and everything. That is taking the charge of your own desires and destiny and so on. So that's really interesting. So
exactly.
Chris, I would like to continue even further. I think this can go on forever and forever. But I know that we all have got our things to do and everything. So hopefully we'll get in touch for the next interview, maybe in the future and everything, to share your adventures and everything. But at the same time, at the end of this interview, I know we have got more things to discuss on, but still. So at the end, what do you want to give the message to Jeff, as well as your NI community, the LabVIEW Champions community, and LabVIEW users, and even the your coworkers at Cirrus Logic, as well as the entire audience of LabVIEW Advantage as well. So what is the final message you want to give?
the final message would be thank you. Thank you so much, Jeff, for your vision. Thank you so much, NI, for bringing me on board. Thank you, Cirrus, for trusting me to solve this really complex problem. Thank you to all of my coworkers who've put up with me. And everybody out there's laughing right now because they know what I mean. So it's a sense of thank you. I have been able to do things that I would have never thought I would ever get the chance to do. And it's all because of everybody else. So thank you.
Wow, that is like a really awesome like ending point to this particular interview. So thank you very much, Chris, for your like valuable time to be part of this ongoing interviews with LabVIEW champions and LabVIEW personalities. So we'll continue on like taking all these interviews and everything. I know like Chris will be hanging on and then try to hear from like other LabVIEW champions from the community what they'll be talking about, like Chris, and then like I had the conversation with like a François Normandin as well. So Chris, the NI week is like coming very close, and then I think like it's only a week or two left for the NI week. So will you also be traveling to Austin? I know you are already in Austin, so it will be just like a walk in the park for you anyways, meeting all the folks, the customers from all over the world will be there. The NI Alliance partner from all over the world will also be there. I think like people will be there to like give these certification exams. There will be lots of like educational tracks as well, new products from NI, and then like keynote speakers are also there. And I also heard that the astronaut Scott Kelly is also be there for the like ending keynote. So it's going to be very interesting event at Austin. So like Chris, like are you also going to present? I know you have been a regular presenter at all these events. So what can the audience expect from you? What presentation you are doing on, and what they can expect? Yeah.
So this presentation I'm going to be giving, I gave at the Certified LabVIEW Architect Summit this last September. It is by far the hardest presentation I've ever given.
Wow. It's
titled Everything a Software Engineer Needs to Know That Has Nothing to Do with Software Engineering.
Wow.
Well, what's that all about? Here's the thesis statement. Or thesis with a summary. Every engineer is going to encounter at least two types of problems in their lives. The engineering problem, and we all know about that, but there's also the political problem. As you go about working on APIs or various solutions, you're never working by yourself, and that means that you need to work with people. Yeah. So learning how to work with, influence, it's really, really important, and it's something that we can't escape. But as engineers, I think that we often take engineering mindsets and engineering principles and try and apply them to people, and that doesn't work. So this presentation is all about what are the important things that we need to think about when interacting with people. And what I suggest is the political arena is all about, really what it boils down to is trust. How do you gain the trust of the people around you? Because if nobody trusts you, then your engineering solutions or your suggestions, nobody's going to follow. So how do you gain the trust of individuals? And what I suggest is, I think I'm starting to give it away, but we as engineers, we tend to think of there is the one generic way we gain trust with a generic human being. And that's not right. The way in which you go about gaining trust depends on the kind of person you're trying to gain trust with. So I talk about 4 different categories of people that you need to gain trust with. And they are in order of importance. The first, most important, and most often overlooked audience you need to gain trust with is yourself. You have to be able to trust yourself. Wow, how do you go about right? So how do you go about gaining trust with yourself? Because if you don't trust yourself, I guarantee you nobody else is going to listen to what you have to say.
Yeah, correct.
So how do you gain trust with yourself? How do you gain trust with your boss? How do you gain trust with your coworkers? How do you gain trust with upper management? I'm sure there's more categories than that. But I talk about this idea of gaining trust and why it's so important. And I talk about some what I would say are legitimate ways to gain trust, and then some illegitimate ways to gain trust. So the political realm is very sticky. And so I talk about the defense against the dark arts. Like, how do you recognize when you are doing something inappropriately or when somebody is doing inappropriately to you? As an example, a whole entire category of inappropriate ways to gain trust, I would say, is through something called logical fallacies. So straw man arguments. And there's a whole entire list of these. So I go through a couple. Anyways, here's a whole entire point. As engineers, we are going to deal with the political aspect of our jobs. You cannot hide from it. As much as we would like to, and as hard as we try, you cannot hide from it. And if you do try, you will only be hurting yourself. So certainly we can talk about really cool LabVIEW architectures, and that's important. But there's also this other area that we very rarely talk about, and that's what my presentation is on. I'm really excited about it. It was a lot of fun. It's actually recorded on YouTube right now, but I look forward to giving it in person again. I'm really passionate about the topic. I hope to see lots of people there.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so like everyone, like we're traveling to Austin for the NI week. Do not miss the presentation from Chris. So like that is how it was. So thank you very much. So like next time we'll have like a similar kind of interesting conversation with the LabVIEW champions. So
thank you so much.
Yeah. So like thank you very much, and goodbye for this interview. We'll see you next time.